Lawyers for the former film producer Harvey Weinstein called more witnesses today in his New York rape trial, which is nearing its conclusion well ahead of schedule. Weinstein has pleaded not guilty to raping a former aspiring actor and to sexually assaulting former production assistant Miriam Haley. Here to give us his legal analysis on the case is attorney Austin Pennington, who we've had here on Offside several times to talk about the opioid cases. But here's something else he's been following. Austin, man, it's always a pleasure to have you on.
Brandon, always glad to be here.
Now, this was a trial that started in early January and was predicted to last 2 months. The prosecution rested its case toward the end of last week, and it appears lawyers could deliver closing arguments as soon as this week. How did the prosecution do, and what is the defense presenting this week?
Well, the prosecution definitely put out a compelling story, and the interesting thing about this case is that there's a lot of situations where previous acts or bad acts are not admissible in testimony. But because the prosecution's theory is that Harvey Weinstein had a modus operandi, he had a way of doing this that he did over and over again, they were able to get into a lot of evidence that normally would be kept out because it's extremely damaging. So the defense has got a tall burden to fight back against for the rest of this week and if it spills into next week.
So what's interesting, since 2017, more than 80 women have accused Weinstein of sexual misconduct. Other accusers have testified at the trial, but many are saying that the Weinstein defense team's aggressive victim-blaming strategy, it's not a good idea in this #MeToo world. Have his accusers given him a legitimate excuse to go after him, such as one of his accusers once saying that Weinstein was her spiritual soulmate, as according to her former roommate, or should the defense employ a different strategy?
Well, I think the defense has got to walk the line. You can't victim shame because I think you're right, Brandon. In the swells of this Me Too movement, that's not going to play well. But I think from what I've read, the defense has done a good job of pointing out inconsistencies in the accuser's testimony, such as emails back and forth between the accused after the alleged sexual assault occurred and trying to show that, well, maybe there's not so much truth to what these people are saying on the stand. And so I think they're walking the line right now, but they do have to be careful.
Do you think Harvey Weinstein will testify himself?
I highly doubt it. And that's what a lot of people have been talking about. You see these big high-profile cases, and it brings to light a lot of questions from non-lawyers who are watching these events transpire. And everybody wants to hear the testimony of the defendant. They want to know what he's going to say. But as his defense lawyers have pointed out, sitting up there and being grilled by trained prosecutors, by trained lawyers who are experts at cross-examination, and having them set up the questions that could actually trip you up, it's just usually not a good sound strategy, especially when in our country, it's the state's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed these offenses.
Now, in your experience with juries and these big cases like this, when someone who's accused, and Weinstein is accused of doing some despicable things, when someone is accused of doing these types of crimes and they don't get on the stand and testify, does it really hurt them with a jury? Because, I could see a juror looking at that and saying, okay, well, if this person's not going to get up there and try to defend himself or defend herself, then why should I believe the people that are making the case for them? What has your experience shown you over the years?
In cases like this, Brandon, in sexual assault cases where the defense is that this was a consensual relationship or something along those lines, it is a very difficult burden for the defense team to get over if their client is not going to take the stand. It's different when you've got maybe, let's say, a DWI case, someone's driving while intoxicated, and really you force the state to prove that they did the right test, they figured out that the person was intoxicated, and you maybe don't need your client to get up there and testify to how many drinks they had or didn't have at the bar. It's different when you've got a human accuser saying, this man sexually assaulted me, and the defense team is trying to show this was a consensual relationship. Well, the jury's going to think, well, why doesn't he get up there and say that? Why isn't he up there? And yes, it's our constitutional right not to take the stand and testify. But as you mentioned, Brandon, you've got human beings in that jury box thinking about this with human minds. And so it's natural for them to wonder, why is he not taking the stand and why is he not testifying? And The judge will instruct the jury that they are not allowed to hold that against him, but that instruction is probably about as worthless as the paper it's written on.
Do you think it's the right strategy not to put him on the stand?
So I'll tell you my theory on this. Anytime I defend somebody accused of a crime, when we go to jury trial, I never make the decision on whether to put my client on the stand until we are just about to the point where if we're going to put him on or her on, then we would need to. And the reason you do that is you see, how does my cross-examination play with the jury as we go through? How much damage am I able to inflict? How many points, so to speak, am I able to score just through cross-examination? If we feel strong enough that we've made our point, that the jury is trekking along with our theory of the case, then there's no reason to take the risk of putting our client up there. Mm-hmm. If we feel like the jury needs to hear a certain piece of the story, or they need further explanation in order to be able to see the case through our eyes, then at that point it becomes a necessity to put our client up there and to tell that part of the story. And that's the difficult thing about this case, is that the jury is going to be left wanting more if he doesn't take the stand. And so that's going to be a tactical decision the defense team is going to have to figure out.
And, I'll also say this too. When I look at him, it's not just the charges that are put up against him, but he doesn't come off as a sympathetic figure. So I'm sure that plays a factor in it as well.
I think it does, and it's kind of twofold. It's a little bit of a double edge. One, you don't want him to get up there and just look like a complete jerk and really blow his image in front of the jury. The other side is that he doesn't come across sympathetic, and you may want to put him up there so you can try to establish a background and a personal connection. So the defense team's really got to see what risk do we need to take, if there is one, and how are we going to play this? What are we more worried about with his image if we're going to put him up there? So
you mentioned earlier that the prosecution made a good case against Harvey Weinstein. Are there any potential surprises that Weinstein's defense team could have this week, especially if it wraps up this week? Or do you see this as a case that appears to be headed towards a conviction of Weinstein?
I think at this point, I'm not sure if I can make a prediction on guilty, not guilty, but I will say I think the defense has done a good job of finding other women who were in and around some of these allegations that have come in and refuted some of the details of the testimony of the accusers. For example, refuting that a certain exchange or interaction happened in a hotel room because the defense witness was there while the accuser was there too. And so that's something that really is going to resonate with the jury. And you also got to think about the timing of this. The jury's hearing from the defense team last, so that's going to be more relevant and in the forefront of their mind. So I think that it's really going to turn on how much damage can the defense team do with these other witnesses to refute the details of the testimony of the accusers.
Legal analyst Austin Pennington has been our guest here, getting us up to date on everything happening with the Harvey Weinstein trial. Austin, man, as always, appreciate your time.
Yeah, happy to be here and love to do a debriefing once they come out with the verdict.
Absolutely.